a lot that I have to read to find out if he's going to be in there. I have to read like 4 chapters right now, so bear with me. No, the covering he removed was a covering like a tarp over the top.
Okay.
It was made of animal skins, I believe.
Oh, I'd never heard
I believe it's in there, but I don't have time to read all of that.
Does that have anything to do with the Lord shutting him in?
No, the Lord just shut the door and shut him in. So what that has to do with is the Lord was the one who took him, and the Lord's the one who shut the door, not somebody else. So the Lord shut him in, but in a sense shut mankind out at the same time.
Okay.
So to me, that was a sign of judgment.
Okay.
The door is shut. So, okay?
Okay.
But the covering, that's what I think, and I would have to read all of that, but I think it speaks of when he was building it, then he covered the top like with a tarp or animal skins. And I think that's what he removed.
That's almost like the tabernacle in the wilderness.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Now I got to go back to Peter. Be nice.
Talking to you, not me. It's okay.
I read that this archaeologist had discovered that the temple is in the city of David. Have you heard that?
No.
Oh. Well, I guess that guy was a quack then.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it's very obvious where the temple was built.
Because when I get over there, I'm looking.
You're going to see, yeah. It's obvious where the temple was, and the city of David is so far below the Temple Mount that because you're going on a trip, right?
Yes.
So you're going to be able to see it's down here, and the Temple Mount is up here, and now they found David's palace in the city of David, but not the temple.
Okay.
And if that archaeologist found it, he's probably not a really good archaeologist.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was an ad for the trip to Israel, by the way. There's like a seat and a half. But you have to do it by Friday. So.
All right, from Facebook. So, in light of the recent shooting at the church, right? So in Texas,
yes.
This person's concerned about security in our congregation. Can you make them a little more confident in our security?
Can I make a comment on our security?
Or yeah, can you just talk about
our guys
our
are
security?
secret? Our guys are Secret Service. No. We do have security. We have a great security team with radios and et cetera, and they're scattered throughout. I don't think we want to name everybody who's doing it, but we have a good security team. We have a good system set up for protection as much as we can, but what kind of breaks my heart is that we have to do that. It breaks my heart that we have to, for the church, have security people out and about, and it's kind of heartbreaking. So, but in light of that, I think 3 years ago, we started a strong security team. So I hope that helps Facebook people. But you're not here, so. Sorry. We love you on Facebook.
Hi, Pastor Pat.
Hi.
I'm kind of intrigued about the Urim and Thummim,
Uh-huh.
and how the high priest casts the sacred lots. Do you know anything about that?
I have no idea.
Mystery.
It's a mystery, and it's interesting that it's spoken of, but God kept it a mystery on exactly how it works and what it was. I mean, he tells us that they used it, and it was used to make decisions, but it doesn't tell us exactly what they were, how they were shaped or how they were used. So So that's kind of fun in a way. It's like we don't know, and if I speculated, I think it would be wrong. I hope
Thank
that,
you.
I know that didn't help a bit, but
Thank you.
All right, ready to talk about the 1,000-Year War?
yeah, but I was looking for the youth. They didn't come over tonight.
I think they were youth cotting.
My heart's broken. But
We'll work on that. All right, so the 1,000-Year War.
war?
Yeah, that's the question is, why is a 1,000-year war necessary if everyone knows God and God's people will win the war and evil will be defeated?
I don't know of a
I'm not
1,000 year.
sure the 1,000-year war they're referring.
I think they may be asking about the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So I think what they're confused about, Jesus is going to come back, and when he comes back, the church is going to come with him as resurrected, redeemed people. But there are a group of people during the tribulation who will accept the Lord, go into the tribulation as believers, but they will still be completely human. They won't be glorified yet. So they'll be in unglorified bodies. They'll procreate. They'll have children. During that 1,000 years, there will be some of the offspring who will believe and some who will not believe. And at the end of that time, those who don't believe will rebel against God and rise up against him, and that's the war I think they're talking about, but it's not 1,000 years. It's like, I think, a 10-minute war, because God crushes them. Well, God crushes them, and that's the end. But the thing we need to understand from that, for me, is in our culture, we're taught a lot about it's our environment that affects our behavior. It's, our parents, it's this, it's that. The thing that affects our behavior is our heart. The Bible tells us our hearts are deceitfully wicked. And those people will live in a perfect environment, have a perfect judge, Jesus. They'll have parents who are believers, and yet they will still rebel. And Satan will be bound for that 1,000 years, so there's not even going to be that evil influence. So it's their heart that is going to rebel against God, and I think we need to understand that. So I hope that helps that person. Because that's a good question, a little bit misasked, but good question.
School of Ministry does a great class on eschatology if you're interested.
Yes, they do. They used to let me teach it. Can you audit it? Yeah, you can audit after you do the 2 years. Wow. Whoa.
That was harsh.
And someone's buying coffee? Oh, no.
That's their question.
Oh,
Is the ringing in their ears, is it okay? I'm just
Hi, Pastor Pat.
hi.
Okay, just so you know, I started reading the Bible from day one. Okay, January 1st. Genesis 4. It says, Genesis 4:17. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. If Adam and Eve only had 2 children, and it was Cain and Abel, where did the wife come from?
Well, they didn't only have 2 children. They were only told about 2 children. They had multiple children. And yes, the boys married their sisters. And that was okay then, because that's all you had. You didn't have, you didn't have anybody else. So they had children, their children intermarried, and then the population grew to a point where I believe after the flood, the DNA in us became more and more corrupt. Intermarriage was no longer something that could be sustained. But in the beginning, it was okay. It wasn't a bad thing, because it's all you had.
Okay, second question. Where do the dinosaurs and the cavemen come in to
Well,
the picture.
I'm-
Is that
I'm-
after the flood?
Yeah, I'm not a believer in cavemen. I think that's
Okay.
a myth.
What about the dinosaurs?
But the dinosaurs, I think dinosaurs were around, and I think when the flood came, if we read about the flood, when the flood comes, this is a theory. There was a canopy over the earth, and it was like a big greenhouse effect. So dinosaurs could survive in that. And it says the sky came in, it collapsed, that canopy collapsed, caused the flood, took away that protective layer, and dinosaurs could no longer survive in that environment, so they became extinct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
In Romans chapter 11, Paul talks about the grafting of the Gentiles. It's 11:7.
Okay.
My question is, and I had this question approached to me earlier, about 2 months ago, about the remnant. I believe that believers, Gentile believers, are also part of the remnant of God's chosen people. Other people believe that only the Jews are the remnant.
Romans 11:7, did you say?
Yeah, we're talking about the olive tree, where the Gentiles were grafted in. Oh, 11:7, sorry, not 17. I'm sorry, Pastor Pat.
Oh, yeah.
11:7, sorry.
Okay, and it's some. Well, yeah, I think I know what you're saying. I believe there's always a remnant of believers.
Right.
Whether we're talking, during Noah's time, there was the remnant with Noah as we go on. So I think there's always a remnant of believers. I believe this specific passage is talking about Israel, not Gentiles. Gentiles were grafted in. I believe the remnant he's speaking of here are the remnant of Israel who are going to believe. Not that they're better than, greater than, but God still has that remnant of his people that he chose from the beginning that are different. I mean, we're not Jews. So that's the direction I would go. But I understand what you're asking too, because God does have a remnant in every generation. Things can seem to get bad, and there's still that remnant of believers. Is that kind of what you're... Because I don't think every believer is a remnant.
Right, no, I agree with that. But I'm wondering if you think just the Jews are a remnant.
In this passage, I do.
But okay, as we move forward, as Gentile believers, I believe we're the remnant as well. Part of the remnant, or I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think I know what you're saying, and it's kind of to me a yes and no. It's a yes. God has a remnant of people. Because in the church, let's say we have the church, and I'm talking about the church general, worldwide.
Right.
Well, there's a remnant of believers within this umbrella that we call the church.
Okay.
So I think maybe that's what you're
That's what
getting at.
I-
Yeah, so there's this entity called the church, but there's a remnant of believers within that, yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good. I mean, that is a good, fair question. So we don't have any youth to ask questions tonight.
Are you up for giving advice?
Wait, we have one more question.
Okay. By all means, come on down.
Okay, in Exodus where it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart, did it mean that God literally did that himself, or that he was hardened against God? And does that still happen today?
Yeah, that's a ongoing, battled out question. So, 6 times it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. 6 times it says that Pharaoh hardened his own heart. So I believe that God did harden his heart by giving him more light. The same sun that melts the butter bakes the clay and makes the clay hard. As God reveals himself, you either respond or reject. The more you reject, your heart gets harder. And I believe that is God hardening the heart, not God intentionally hardening the heart, but by God revealing himself, the heart is hardened. And if we follow the Pharaoh thing, each one of the steps that was taken, God was revealing more of himself to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was rejecting more. So that's why I think it's kind of divided. So as we harden our heart, in a sense, God hardens our heart because he reveals himself to us. And I don't think he's doing it to harden our hearts. He does it because he loves us. So does that help? And does he still do that today? Yeah, I think as people reject God, their hearts are hardened today. And I believe God gives them more light. So I hope that helps. That's a tough one. But you have to remember when we're speaking evangelistically or however we want to talk about it, when we get into those issues, you have to remember that the Bible declares that whosoever believes on the Lord will be saved, and that God is not keeping anybody out. He doesn't lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. So I think that's important. Okay, we got someone sneaking up on you.
Happy New Year, Pastor. I'm asking these questions for my wife. No, this is true. I am asking this question for my wife. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 and 2, particularly it says should I read it to you? Okay. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves for all whom they choose. The question is specific to the sons of God. What is the reference? Who is the reference?
Did someone pay you to ask that question?
I say again, my wife is asking this question.
We were talking about this earlier. This is an ongoing, so there's a huge debate. And there's different views. There's the view that the sons of God were angels, and angels came down and had sex with women and had an offspring. And then God saw that there was evil on the earth and destroyed the planet. I don't hold to that view for a couple reasons I'll tell you in a minute. The other view is that the sons of God were in the godly line of Seth, and that they were marrying women outside of the godly line, and they became corrupt morally. So, I kind of go more with that one because it says God saw that there was evil on the earth. If the evil was done from angels, why would God judge humans? Because the angels sinned. And the Bible's specific about he judged because of sin in the world, not because of some weird sexual encounter between angels and humans. And that's one part that does bother me, because then it's implied that he destroyed the earth with a flood because of this intermarriage stuff. And the Bible teaches he destroyed the earth because of sin. So I don't think they're angels. And the whole thing comes from, I did a paper on this in Bible college, worst grade I ever got. So, well, because anyway, it doesn't matter. I just got a bad grade. But, because what?
Missler was grading.
No. No, it's because I didn't do the whole assignment. Here's a good thing, get a simple concordance. I think this is the greatest way to find out, for me, if they're angels. Get a Strong's Concordance. Do you know what that is? It's a big green book. Grab a Strong's Concordance and look up the word angels and see how many times it's used in Genesis, what word is used, and then look up how many times it's used in the rest of the Pentateuch, which Moses wrote, and what word he used. And here's what you're going to find out. He always used the word angels. He never used the word sons of God. Job used the word sons of God, Job was written 1,500 years prior to Moses. So when we take that, we're jumping books, we're jumping decades, millenniums to try and make something fit. So that's my argument, because everybody goes to Job. Now there is a passage in Peter that's hard to deal with along those same lines. So, I mean, it goes like, and it gets complicated, but I think the simplest argument is, if Moses wanted to say angels were mixing with men, I think he would have used that same word, and I think he used it over 180 times. So I think he would have used it, but that's my opinion. And there are great, strong men of God who completely disagree with me. Robert Furrow. We've been on a Q&A together and spent the whole night discussing this. You're welcome.
All right, so this is going to kind of piggyback off that last question. I definitely held to the other argument that you mentioned, but that definitely challenged my thought process on it, so I'm definitely going to research that. Where would your stance be on where, like, the Nephilim and the giants came from, for your argument?
Well, you know, I'm not sure where they came from, but here's what I know. They didn't come from that. Because if they came from that and God destroyed every living creature, why are they still around in the book of Numbers? So, do you get my point?
Yeah.
So I believe the Nephilim, and I believe there were giants in Nephilim, and there's if you do a huge word study on Nephilim, it can just mean men of renown and men of great strength. So it doesn't necessarily, but we know there were giants because Goliath was a giant. So they were huge people, but I don't believe they were from that, because if they were from that, they would have been destroyed in a flood, and yet here they are still in Numbers way after the flood. So look that up and study it. It's kind of interesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that one was for Robert Furrow too. Thank you very much. I hope he's watching on Facebook Live. No, I don't. He'll call me.
I had a question on Genesis 19:8, where Lot's going to give his two daughters to the Sodomites, and they're virgins, and then a few verses later it refers to his sons-in-law, and that didn't seem to make much sense. I know there's a couple of different options, but I don't know if you have one that might be.
Yeah, that's so. How close I'm not sure of the chronology of that. You know, I know what you're asking, and I know they were virgins, and then he has his sons-in-law, which could be a couple different things. They could have been betrothed to those two, and hence they were sons-in-law in that sense. And, you know, I'm not sure of the chronology just off the top of my head without reading those chapters all together.
Right.
But,
well, it was while the angels were there, so it was immediate.
excuse me?
It was while the angels were there talking to Lot, so it was immediate. There was no time span. But that's what I thought. Maybe they were betrothed, or
That's what I would have to say, that they were betrothed and not yet consummated the marriage.
Okay, it makes sense. That's what I thought.
Okay. What?
Verse 14, it says they were pledged.
Oh, they were pledged to be married. Okay, thank you.
Do you want to give some advice?
I don't know.
I don't know either. So and I'll just kind of rephrase the question to make it easier for me to understand. As we look at, you know, you've been talking about reading through the scriptures, beginning January 1st and getting through the Bible, and there are times where individuals like myself I'll throw myself out there, right? So it can become very much like a chore or very much like a habit. How can you prevent yourself from thinking, okay, I have to read my Bible today because that's what I'm supposed to do, rather than having the desire to read the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, but I think a couple things we need to understand. I believe that reading through the scriptures in a year should almost be the habit thing. Like, I have a habit of breathing. I do. I don't think about it. I breathe because I want to stay alive. And I think reading and making ourselves do that out of habit is keeping us spiritually alive. I do not believe your 1 year through the Bible should be your devotional time that you're spending with the Lord. I think that should be your breathing, staying alive time, but you should have a devotional time where you're spending time in Scripture and prayer with the Lord aside from that daily reading. So I hope that helps. And I think it's a good habit. Like breathing is a good habit. We got one more. You yelled at me.
I don't have to give her the mic.
No, you don't. She yelled at me.
All right, so
They're having an argument in the front row. Just have to give them a minute.
So I was wondering if you would be able to comment on how the Calvary Chapel movement is kind of, I've heard it's splitting or going down different paths. Would you want to talk about that? Or?
I mean, I can comment briefly, and my personal take on it right now is let's wait and see what happens. Let's watch, and I don't really think it's as divided as some people say it is. There's some differences of opinion and kind of differences of direction, and you know, I think we just have to watch. I don't think it's affecting our fellowship. As far as what we do, we're going to do what we've always done, is teach a word, love the Lord, make disciples, and I believe that's kind of what's going on. It seems to me it's, you know, there was some personal things that got involved that made it a little bit messy, and I think those personal things have either been resolved or they're deciding to put them aside. So, but I don't think Calvary Chapel will ever be what it was as far as this one united great move, and I think that's okay. You know, I mean, it's a new season, a new time, and we need to follow what the Lord has for us. So, you know, it's bad if we just get stuck in this, well, here's what we were. Well, we're not that anymore, so let's find out what we are.
Can any church become a Calvary Chapel? That's not possible.
No, it's not. Well, and you're right. Any church cannot become affiliated with Calvary Chapel. But on the other side, and I hate to get too detailed about this, but the other Calvary Global Network, any church can be part of that because it's just a network of churches. It's kind of here's where we come together, and I have a few issues with that. That's kind of scary to me. I'm hoping it'll take a better form. Does that make sense? But no, not any church can. But legally now, I mean, it's gotten so, legally now, you could put Calvary Chapel on your building and no one's going to come and take it off, I guess. No, I would not. Tony Clark might, but I won't.
So the dove is not trademarked, is what you're saying?
I think it is, but I don't know that anybody's going to enforce it. Okay, this is our last question, then we'll do.
I talked to you a while back about the new awakening coming to Phoenix at the Sun Stadium. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to find out your thoughts on the New Apostolic Reformation and your view on ecumenism, that people are lining back up with the Catholic Church and bound to the Catholic Church, signs and wonders that people are going after experience, signs and wonders like, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the video of raising Olive from the dead, this craziness that's out there right now, and just want to hear your thoughts on where, because I'm new to Calvary, where the whole New Apostolic Reformation, because you're doing teachings on false teachings and God sent a strong delusion. And I was talking to a friend today, and she said at the end times, God's Spirit will fall on all mankind, and signs and wonders will fall. And I said, yeah, that'll be a great falling away too. So where does this all fall together?
Right. Yeah, that New Apostolic Reformation is, I'm sure some people are not familiar with it, and God bless you if you're not. But it's a movement where I don't think it's new. It's an old movement revived. Back in the 80s, there were the Kansas City Prophets, kind of same thing. So there's certain men that want to be declared apostolic authority over the churches, and they want to have this great signs and wonder movement, etc. And they begin to lose sight of biblical teaching and following the Bible, so they're more into experience than the Bible and having these great experiences. So that's what she's referring to, and you can Google it. And there's certain men who are now leaders of that. They're part of that, and they're promoting this thing. And as she mentioned, there's a big conference in Phoenix coming up on that. I would say that would be something you'd want to stay away from. It's a dangerous thing. Whenever you let your experience supersede biblical truth, you're going to get in trouble. And when your relationship with the Lord depends on experience, you're going to get let down, because you're not always going to have great experiences. You're going to have hard times, you're going to have difficult times, you're going to have great times, you're going to have growing times, you're going to have beat up times, and that's our walk with the Lord, and that's how He grows us. So that going on, and then just some other, there was just recently a child who died, and the church was chanting to raise her from the dead, and it was kind of a heartbreaking. If you watched it, it was heartbreaking. I read an article about it, and one woman who's a really good apologist, she said this about it. You know, it's bad enough to lose a child, and that's bad. But then when you put your hope in false teaching, now you get that ripped out. And she was part of it. She wasn't coerced into it. She was the one that led the whole thing of reviving her daughter, raising her daughter from the dead. So, but now you've got more heartbreak. And this person said to the pastor of that church, your theology's broken, you need to fix it. And I agree with that. I think that's a great way to put it. And you know, we wouldn't affiliate or come alongside someone doing something like that. It's just, and to me, it's that all of that thing, you know, this has been building for a while. This New Apostolic Reformation's been building for a while, and it kind of culminated in this. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I remember Kenneth Copeland declaring that he's never going to die, and making statements like that. And then he said, well, what happens when you do die? And he said, I won't die, I will just lay down and go be with the Lord. So here's what happens. You get false theology, then you redefine things. And you redefine things to make your theology work, and that's scary, you know. And we need to be people who, our theology comes out of the Scripture. And when I was in Bible college, I was told this: if my theology ever comes against Scripture, I need to change my theology. Don't change the Bible. So I hope that helps some, but it's a kind of a scary thing. But for me, I saw all of this in the 80s with the Word of Faith people, and you know, Dave Hunt wrote about it, and he had the books about it, and you know, some other writings that were against some of that. And it's just kind of same thing. We need to understand something. The devil doesn't do anything new. He just recirculates the same stuff and calls it something new. And it's interesting if we watch. Just go back biblical, and it's the same thing, just recirculated. and he wraps it in a new package and gets people excited about it, and it's heartbreaking. So, all right, let's stand up.